Let me ask you something. What if the worst betrayal you've ever faced, what if that was actually the first step toward your greatest purpose? It sounds crazy, right? Well, today we're going to dig into one of history's most powerful stories of resilience to find a blueprint for exactly that, turning insane hardship into an incredible blessing. You know that feeling, right? When the rug is just ripped out from under you, and usually by the people you trusted the most. It's a kind of pain we all understand. But the story we're looking at today, wow, it shows us how one person handled that exact moment, and in doing so, literally changed the course of history. All right, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off with a young man whose life is, well, it's about to be completely and totally derailed. I mean, he's at the absolute top of his world, but a sudden, brutal fall is right around the corner. So meet Joseph. He's 17, and he is the absolute apple of his father's eye. See, he was born to his dad, Jacob, in his old age, from his favorite wife, Rachel. So this special status, it really sets him apart. But, it also kind of paints a target on his back. Okay, so what we're looking at here is basically the perfect storm of resentment brewing against this kid. First, you've got that coat. This wasn't just some nice jacket, it was a coat of many colors, and it probably symbolized the birthright, that position of honor that his older brothers felt was theirs. Then, on top of that, he starts sharing these dreams he's having, visions of his entire family bowing down to him. Now, to his brothers, this wasn't just teenage arrogance. This felt like a direct threat. I mean, you can just feel that jealousy festering into this really dangerous hatred. And this is where it all comes to a head, the moment of betrayal. Instead of killing him, which was actually on the table, they sell him for 20 pieces of silver, the going rate for a young slave. His own brothers hand him over to traders on their way to Egypt. Just like that, his life as the favored son is completely over. He's no longer a person, he's property. Now this timeline, this really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? He's sold into slavery at 17. He doesn't rise to power until he's 30. That's 13 years. And then it's another 9 years before he even sees his brothers again. So let's be clear. This is not an overnight success story. This is a marathon of suffering that stretches over 2 decades of his young life. So the big question is, how does someone even endure that? How do you not just survive, but actually thrive when literally everything has been stripped away from you? This is the absolute core of what we're talking about today, the practical strategies Joseph used to forge strength in the absolute worst circumstances imaginable. And this verse right here, this is the key to the whole thing. Even as a slave in a foreign land, in the house of this high-ranking Egyptian official named Potiphar, something was just different about Joseph. The story keeps coming back to one central fact. He never lost his connection to God. And this wasn't just some private internal feeling. No, it was so obvious, so visible, that even his pagan master saw it and ended up trusting him with his entire household. And looking at his life, we can actually pull out this incredible practical blueprint for resilience. First, he acknowledges the truth. He doesn't deny it, he's a slave and later a prisoner, but he doesn't let that bitterness define him or poison his work ethic. Second, he chooses a higher perspective. He trusts that there's more to the story than just his immediate pain. This is what allows him to trust the unseen plan, to believe that even in the dark, a purpose is unfolding. And finally, and this is so crucial, he relies on God's strength, surrendering a burden he knows he can't carry alone. This framework is everything. 13 years. Let's just sit with that number for a second. 13 years, not just as a slave, but also as a prisoner. Because, get this, after he excels in Potiphar's house, he's falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into a dungeon. I mean, can you imagine the injustice? And yet, what does he do? Does he crumble, get cynical, give up? No way. In prison, the exact same pattern repeats itself. He works with integrity, he earns the trust of the warden, and he's put in charge of the other prisoners. His character didn't change with his circumstances, and that proves something so powerful. Our response to injustice defines us way more than the injustice itself. Okay, so all of this is building to the story's incredible climax. After those 13 long years, Joseph interprets a dream for Pharaoh, predicts a massive famine, and bam, he's made second in command of all of Egypt. And when that famine hits, guess who shows up looking for food? His brothers, starving, desperate, and bowing down before the very man they sold into slavery decades before, with no idea who he is. Now, think about it. This is his moment for revenge, right? But he doesn't take it. And what he does next perfectly illustrates the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. See, forgiveness, that's an internal choice to let go of bitterness, something Joseph had probably done years earlier just to survive. But reconciliation, that's about rebuilding trust. And to see if his brothers had really changed, he puts them through a series of tests. Not to be cruel, but to see if their hearts were genuinely repentant. And when he finally reveals who he is, this is what he says. These might be some of the most powerful words ever spoken. He looks them in the eye, and he acknowledges their evil intent. You intended to harm me. He doesn't sugarcoat it. But then he reframes everything. But God intended it for good. He could finally see that all his suffering had a purpose, to get him in a position to save his family and countless others from starvation. That statement, God intended it for good, introduces this massive idea, one that just underpins the entire story. It's this concept that you can find a divine purpose woven through even the most painful, broken parts of your life. The theological term for this is divine providence. And what it means is this. It's the belief that God isn't the one causing evil things to happen, but he is so powerful, so sovereign, that he can take the malicious, broken, and painful things that people do and weave them into a much larger redemptive plan. And look, this isn't just some ancient theology. This maps directly onto modern psychological concepts that we talk about all the time. You see perspective shifting, Joseph reframing his suffering through a long-term purposeful lens. You see post-traumatic growth, where his trauma literally became the catalyst that developed the strength and wisdom he needed to lead a nation. The whole story is a masterclass in emotional intelligence, and it shows us that real forgiveness is freedom. You release the bitterness not for them, but for you, so you can be free to fulfill your own purpose. But the story's meaning goes even deeper than that. For centuries, people have read this and seen not just an inspiring story of one man's resilience, but a narrative that points forward, a foreshadowing of an even greater story of salvation. Just take a look at this comparison. It's pretty stunning. Joseph, the beloved son, is rejected by his brothers and sold for silver. He suffers unjustly. At age 30, he begins his life-saving mission. And through his suffering, he ends up providing the bread that saves his people from physical death. Every single one of these points acts as a powerful foreshadowing, what some call a type, of Jesus Christ, who would also be the beloved son, rejected by his own people, sold for silver, suffer unjustly, and through his sacrifice offer the bread of life to save all of humanity from spiritual death. So, in the end, Joseph's unbelievable journey from a pit to a palace leaves us with this profound sense of hope. It really demonstrates that no person and no situation is beyond redemption. Even when human actions are meant for pure evil, a greater purpose for good can be at work. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We all face our own pits, right? Our own betrayals, our own long, silent years of waiting. So if God can take a story this broken, this messy, and redeem it for such an incredible purpose, what could he be doing in yours?